Welcome everyone to our Camunda Day Amsterdam. Thanks for coming and attending our event. I hope you can hear me all right. Is that working? Yeah? Great. So, my name is Robert. I have the honor to kick things off. We are looking at like a good half day of sessions on Camunda related topics. We're going to see live demo right after my presentation. We're going to hear from two customers, the Provinzial Insurance from Germany and Alphabet, who will present their cases, which is typically very interesting to other users of our software or people who consider using our software. And we're going to hear from Niall about microservices and how Camunda helps you in these contexts. And I'm trying to kind of start with a more high-level introduction. So I have the high-level stuff. I'm trying to be as hands-on as possible and basically give you, share some insights with you, what we have learned over the years, what makes people successful with Camunda and how does the typical journey look like and how do people adopt the technology. So I do assume that you have a basic understanding of what our product is about, so I'm not going to start at the BPMN level and what that is about and why you need a workflow and why not. You will gain lots of insights into this as well throughout the day. For my part, I will simply assume that there is an understanding of that. I want to give you some insights on Camunda-related project characteristics, the pitfalls and how to avoid them, which is probably helpful if you're in a project yourself, and the difference of the community and the enterprise edition and when is it wise to use one or the other. Quick poll, who is using Camunda already in some sort of project? That's great. Okay, cool. I have a lot more material that I'm able to cover in detail, so I left it in there because we're going to share the slides afterwards. There's a bit more in there, but I will not go into everything in very detail and try to focus on the most interesting parts. In general, I also wanted to mention we are here today. There's quite a few Camunda people on the ground. You can recognize us because we have red badges. So the presentations is one thing, but in the breaks, please take the chance, approach us with any kind of questions, and we will try to direct you to the people who can help you. That's the overall idea of this event. Okay, so looking at our customers, we're doing this for 6 years now. We're having this product and guide customers through their adoption journeys in automation. You can cluster your customers in many different ways. Here we do it in like big corporations, which you can find on the left side. There's the big banks, insurances, telcos, medias. And you have the attackers on the right side. So those guys try to steal the market from them. Those guys try to protect it. And then we see an increasing demand from the public sector. What do all of them have in common? And that is that they build custom IT solutions to support their business. So they made the decision for our core processes. We want to build our own application with own IT resources because we don't want to use off the shelf simply because it doesn't fit as well as that. And this is similar in all of these contexts. So when we look at what I want to talk about, it's going to be guided through the projects because our product in all of these contexts is always being adopted in IT projects. So it's nothing that just one person adopts on a rainy Sunday afternoon and then you have it. It requires a solid project of at least 3 people. It requires the organization to commit to that and see the value in it. So that is why I'm talking a lot about projects and how they are typically characterized. So many times it's about automating manual work. So some stuff is still done manual, it can be automated. Let's do that, let's use workflow for that. This is a typical starting point. Another one is we already use workflow in whatever sort. Either it's homegrown, we build it ourselves, but we want to improve it with a proper workflow system, or it's some legacy system that we don't like, and we want to replace it with something else. So this is something that also happens quite frequently. Otherwise, other use cases is like adding workflow to the software product. You build a software product, you say, I want some workflow capability in there, and that's why I embed a flexible open source technology. And the fourth one is like, let's provide a centralized platform within our big organization for other developers to use workflow and leverage that. Why these projects? Like, what are the customers aiming at? It's a lot of different stuff. I'm not going to read out all of that, but it's mainly two categories. It's either we want to increase our level of service to the customer. We want to be better, faster, higher quality, whatever it is. And we want to deliver whatever we deliver more efficient. So you will see a lot of different points, but they all relate to that. This is increasingly important in very competitive markets that we are facing everywhere today. People try to bring their new products and new stuff to market as fast as possible, and oftentimes that is related to some IT projects or changes going on in the IT landscape. And with our technology, they try to be as fast as possible. And for example, if you compare that to old legacy BPMS systems, this can be achieved a lot faster. Okay, so how does a project look like? Typically, it's 3 to 9 or 12 months. It's either done in-house or outsourced to a solution provider or something in between. Most of the times, it's actually something in between. We have some own developer resources, and we do have some people helping us from the outside. I think in the both customer presentations that we're going to see today fall in that middle category. It's IT projects, so you find the typical roles in there. Looking at the success factors, there's one thing I want to highlight, and that's something that we have seen go wrong. It's not just about picking a great technology and giving it to the team. You need to make sure if they use BPMN and this kind of workflow engine for the first time, don't just like throw it at them, but make sure they are being trained in these new ways of building software. Our product can be adopted quite fast. It's made for developers to be picked up quickly, but it requires a minimal amount of training. So make sure that at least the people get a training in these BPMN and DMN standards, whatever you use. It just takes you a week, and it makes such a difference. So I can encourage everyone to benefit from that, because it helps you to be so much faster down the line if you know what you're doing and how to use it. I mean, this is fairly abstract view of how these projects are being conducted. It's not meant in a waterfall way, so I'm a big proponent of agile thinking, but in general, of course, before you do a project, you need to prepare it and basically get the budget for it and get it going. Then you need to implement it. You do that typically in an agile fashion today, Scrum, Kanban, whatever you use. And you need to get to the point that you can actually put your application to production, and then a different world kind of starts, because you're operating something in production and you're trying to improve it over time. So this is a fairly abstract view. It comes in different flavors. We turn to our partners for some specific examples. This is just one from one specific partner who breaks these phases down into little sprints where they say, well, we need something for setup. And then in their case, their blueprint, it takes 4 to 6 months to roll it out. This is just here to give you a specific example. It, of course, involves different roles. That depends on your setup. We always try to not bring anything but a great workflow technology to you. So whatever system works for you, whatever IT architecture landscape works for you, our aim is always to integrate into what is there and not to change everything. We just bring you the workflow piece. So it's kind of a best of breed approach. There's more examples from other partners. You can see projects typically run between half a year or a year. They consist of a lot of IT people, so it starts with a team probably of 3. It typically goes up to 10. If it's more than 10, you probably want to break it up again. This is just some specific examples what we have seen in practice. So preparing, you need to set up the right project in the first place, so the best technology doesn't help you if you're after the wrong goal. So one way or the other, we are all operating in this cycle where we say, well, we try to, we have probably some digital process in operation. We analyze that, we find some problems that are worth fixing, we design solutions for it, we implement it, and then it starts all over again. It's not that everyone does it structured in that way, but it's happening. This is real life. So you look at this stuff, it's not that you always start greenfield. You have something and you say, this is an area where really it makes sense to invest and improve. And what we try to do is we basically try to help you along this life cycle, focusing either on implementation and design, how this can be done, or focusing on the operations part and basically spotting new areas where you want to improve. Let's come to community or enterprise. The first thing I always say is we love both. Like, who of you is on the community edition of our product? Great. Who of you is on the enterprise edition of our product? Also great. So most important is you do either one of those. What I want to do, I don't want to like advocate for one or the other side. I want to just give you some examples about what the differences are actually about, and when we see people typically adopting one or the other. And we welcome you to make the choice for yourself. So as I said, it's both great. That's why also the community edition has all the core elements that a developer needs to actually be productive available. So it's the core engines. There's no difference in terms of this area here between community and enterprise. There's the modeler. You need that to model the processes. There's a task list and like kind of a tiny version of the cockpit. The enterprise stack is a bit more. That's how our company actually monetizes on top of open source. That's why we exist as a business in the long run and can keep maintaining the project. So there is a collaborative modeling environment which is called Covino. Who has heard of Covino before? It's being launched and coming very close to the main product. So I like to call it the Google Docs for BPMN. This is probably the simplest way to describe it. Powerful operation tooling and an analytics tooling for the business side. On top of that, with the Enterprise Edition, you get services in terms of maintenance and support, consulting and training, which basically allow you to gain access to certain parts of the knowledge a bit faster, or a bit more individual. In general, I would say, when does it make sense to use one or the other? It always depends a little bit, but typically the Enterprise Edition allows you to move a bit quicker. So the faster you need to move and the more critical the process is that you are automating, the more likely it is that the value of the enterprise is worth spending the money in the end for your organization. That's the simple rule. Here's an example. I think that was actually Niall, who's going to present later, who came to those guys, and they were actually struggling for many months with certain questions of the product, and then the consultant came in and actually helped them to solve a lot in a couple of days, and that helped them to accelerate. It's just one example. Of course, before kickoff, you have to have certain stuff in place. I'm not going to read out all of that. You can study that afterwards. Let's look into, like, when you start your project, what happens then and how we can support you. Typically, the setup is that some sort of business unit or other unit requests a solution from the IT, like, can we build this stuff? Or can you build this stuff for you? So here's the requirements side, here's the implementation side. The closer those two are together throughout the project, the better the outcome typically, standard agile way of thinking. So what can we do to make that happen? We do have this Covino component, which allows people to actually collaboratively start modeling the process and then discussing about it. So you have to make sure to keep the people in the loop. The first good news is you're using BPMN, and this has proven very, very successful over the years for business IT alignment or IT alignment, whatever. Like, let's align on what we are trying to build. Who of you is using BPMN successfully and likes it? It's a beautiful language. We love it, and we have built an application around it which allows you to share it, to create models, to share them, to comment, to link requirements to them. This is called Covino. It has a repository. That's what I call the Google Docs, and that really helps to get people involved on the BPMN side. Of course, you need to, I already mentioned that, you need to train your people, make sure they have all the knowledge and they get the guidance, they get the best practices. The knowledge is there, you just need to basically get access to that and facilitate that for your teams. This is just some examples. Of course, you need to determine how to integrate that into your stack, which stack to use in the first place. You need to look at stuff like backup, data, recovery, and all these kind of things which are not solved out of the box if you adopt a best of breed product for one problem. But you need to ask yourself these questions. Don't do it in a way that you like forget about your existing development environment and what works for you and for the developers. So we always advocate to look what is there and then see how Camunda can fit into that. That's one of our core strengths, and like the things we can do better than others, that we actually fit very nicely into basically most of the programming setups that you will find out there. You just have to make the right choices on how to use the product. And of course, yeah, this is just about the support. You can always turn to us. If you're enterprise, you have the official support, but if you're community, you have a forum. This is also great, so you can also turn to that one and basically address problems and missing features. I can encourage everyone to actually do that. This is just a nice story of Allianz, one of our early adopters, not in Munich, but in Indonesia. And they really adopted us back in 2013 already because they wanted that guidance. And they benefited a lot from the fact that we were able to guide them. And even the time difference and the physical difference didn't block us from doing that. Okay, let's say we finished the product. We put it out to production. That's an interesting moment. We face new challenges. Now we want to know, we have tested the application, it's good, it looked good, everyone signed off of it, business said yes, IT said yes, operations said yes, then we put it into production, and typically what happens, bam, there's a problem. This is like, it's not every time, but of course, if you bring something to production, especially like for the first time, it's very, very likely that there's stuff that is not perfect in there. So the first thing we need to know what is going on. Again, the BPMN helps us a lot because it brings it all together. We do have the cockpit tooling, which allows you to actually monitor. It has a simple version in the community edition. It has the full data view in the enterprise edition. And you can actually see what is going on, and you can react to that, and you can fix the problems. So that helps you a lot. Also, there's a bit more on top of that. You do have certain support in the cockpit tooling from a UI perspective. You do have the APIs for everyone. So let's say we rolled out something. We started 2,000 processes. We see there's a bug in there. We roll out the next version with a bug fix, but we still have these 2,000 instances running on the wrong version. You can do stuff like migrating them to the new version so that they can basically finish successfully in that version. This kind of things it's supported in the enterprise cockpit. That's a typical enterprise feature, but you do have the APIs if you want to build this functionality around it by yourself. This is a simple version of how it looks, because you need to map one thing to the other, and then if a step doesn't exist anymore, you need to make the choice where that token should end up. I'm not going to go into the details of performance, but this is just an advice and a best practice to think of it from the get-go. what are your performance requirements? There is no simple answer to that. I'm not a technical person, so I will not get into the nitty-gritty details of that. But we have successfully guided our customers through very high load scenarios. We are in telco with 5 nines and all these kind of things, and banks, and there's typically high requirements around that. There's a lot of knowledge, there's a lot that you can do. It's not like this one answer that will bring you there, but if performance is critical, you can anticipate that from the get-go, and you should include that in the very beginning of your project, not that you end up building it in a way that is not performant in the long run. You don't want your developers to be surprised that this was actually meant to handle hundreds and thousands of instances per day. So history is a topic, the overall cluster setup, the way you do updates, right? This is an interesting way if you try to minimize the downtime while you're putting in an update of Camunda. We do have a lot of experience. Always feel free to turn to us on these topics. We have T-Mobile who run 100,000 instances on a daily basis. That's a good example. We collaborated very closely, and they actually managed to operate this system with a very small team due to the cockpit tooling. They are heavy cockpit users, for example. It's a great story to read. Okay, let's cover continuous improvement. I'm looking at my time. Remember those guys who requested this solution in the first place? We wanted to understand each other and collaborate. Now the solution is in production, but it's the first version of it. I always say it's very, very unlikely from a statistical perspective that this first version is the best version of the process. It's much more likely that it's an okay version, but there are many areas for improvement. So what we need to do is we need to empower these people who requested the solution to make decisions on how it should be improved, because it's oftentimes a business decision of where we should improve a process. And that is why we created our optimized component, which allows business people to actually gain insights. The beautiful thing is we still have that BPMN that they understood in the first place back when we started the project. And what we simply do is we map all the data that is being produced by the engines to these processes and allow them to do analysis on that, create dashboards and alerts and all sorts of stuff around it. We're going to see examples about that. And that helps us in that life cycle, right? Because if the business people still know what is going on once the application is in production, they can actually help us. We can keep the communication going. It's not like, I understood what we wanted back in the days, but I don't quite understand what I got in the end. You don't want to end up in that kind of situation. So that's where the optimized component helps you a lot. I just brought this example. There's many more from Talanx, which is also an insurance company. They adopted Camunda quite soon, and they did it in a nice way. I like their journey, and I wanted to give you that as an final example on how to best adopt the product. What they did is they started very small. They started with a non-Camunda BPM product. Doesn't matter what it was, but they weren't happy, so they were looking for alternatives. They did a POC with Camunda's, kind of liked it, but yeah, well, it's a big migration, so let's do it step by step. They did a very tiny pilot project that turned out to be successful. Then they roll it out into all their car insurances, and then it continued to grow. It spread inside of the organization, and now other parts like the claims, and even in areas where they didn't anticipate workflow to play a role, like in microservices, now the product is being adopted. And to look at it a bit more abstract, that's what we advocate. Like if you do digitalization in your company, you can start AI projects, you can start blockchain projects, but if it's about your core business, you probably want to do it a bit like in a risk-averse fashion and do it step by step and try to produce these tiny projects where you say, well, I've gained some knowledge, I see if I like it, I see if it works, I get questions, and then I go to the next step and the next step. And the technology typically allows the customers to do that quite well. And once you build a lighthouse project and it worked, we always encourage people to actually celebrate that success. This is just pictures from our annual conference, which is actually happening in September, where here Goldman Sachs or Deutsche Bahn or Generali presented their cases. Why did I put this up? Because sometimes people manage to roll out quite a stable system based on Camunda. And the problem with quite stable system is sometimes people don't realize how good they are, like they get overlooked. So that's why I made this my last point, to actually encourage you to also talk about that success. Not only on Camunda events or to the outside, but also towards inside of your organization, because that's why I brought the Talangs example. That allows others to actually get the idea and also adopt that and get the same value from it. That was it from my side. I'm here, of course, the whole day for questions. I will turn over to Michael now for his amazing demo throughout our stack. I promised to save him some time because he has a great demo. So hand it over to Michael, and we just need to switch these microphones. Thank you.